again, there have been a few conservative voices out there brave enough to stick up for OAN. My next guest is one of them, men. Congressman Buddy Carter. He says he anticipates that House Republicans will launch a full investigation into how Democrats pressured AT&T and Verizon to blacklist One America News. With Republicans in control of the lower chamber now and in control of all the committees, they have the power to do just that. And that's what Buddy Carter says he will do, and I hope so. Before we bring him on, I want to show you a part of an interview that he did recently with our D.C. correspondent, John Hines.
What we witnessed on the Energy and Commerce Committee was nothing short, in my mind, of interference by members of our committee in sending letters, making inquisitions about to companies about what they labeled as misinformation that was being disseminated by some of the platforms and by some of the companies. And then, you know, they've asked for answers to that, and then shortly thereafter, you see some of the conservative channels and some of the conservative networks being dropped from AT&T and from Verizon, and One America News is an example. They were dropped, and it of course raises questions as to whether the federal government and members of Congress are having influence over these companies and causing them to suppress conservative voices.
They sure are. Joining us now, he represents Georgia's 1st Congressional District. Let's welcome to the program for the first time, and hopefully a new friend of ours, Buddy Carter. Congressman, first and foremost, thank you for speaking up for OAN. We feel like we've been left out a little bit, I would say, when it comes to members on the Hill, large social media influencers, people that have benefited by coming on this program and this network for several years, all of a sudden kind of forgot us after we got canceled, and I'm wondering why. But I'm glad to see that you are being a voice.
Well, I will never stop standing up for free speech. I've always believed that more speech, not less speech, is the opponent of bad speech, and that's why we need more free speech. Let's face it. What you just went over and what you just described, with the federal government having influence over these platforms and members of Congress sending letters and sending inquiries into some of these platforms as to the conservative voices that are later dropped. I mean, come on! I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night.
Let's talk about your colleagues from California that sent the original letter in February of 2021. And then the following year, when our contract renewal date comes up, I think it was in March, I believe, because April 5th was our last day. This is direct. I'll get to the Verizon and Frontier with you in a minute. All of a sudden, poof, they don't want to negotiate. We offered them, I spoke with the owners here, we offered them the sweetest deal ever. They turned around and told folks that we were holding out for more cash, and that's why the negotiations fell apart. And that's not what happened with them or Verizon or Frontier, with anyone. We offered it next to nothing because we want to get the messaging out there, the facts, the truth about what's happening in this country. And they all said no. And then they tell us that they did internal reviews and say we're full of misinformation. I'm looking at this letter, Buddy, and I'm sure you've seen it. If we can bring it back up on the air here. This is the one from your colleagues on the Democrat side of the House. And they're mentioning misinformation, disinformation. They mentioned 3 networks. Why do you think only one got canceled, Buddy?
Well, and that's where the problem is. That's where I find the problem. Look, as a member of Congress, I don't want to get into business decisions. I don't feel like we ought to be dictating, as these 2 members of Congress dictated, 2 platforms, who they're going to carry and who they're not going to carry. That's private business. I was in business for 32 years. I get it. I understand. However, I do think it raises serious questions when a member of Congress, or 2 members of Congress in this case, send a letter, and then later on you find that a conservative news outlet has been dropped. Again, this is something that raises all of our concern. I get it. I understand negotiations are private. But then again, I also understand that, you look and you see that the liberal voices, the liberal programs, they're retaining those, but they're not retaining the conservative programs.
And buddy, can
They
I
are
point out
willing
the
to
fact
pay
that those
for the liberal programs, but not the conservative ones?
Yeah.
I mean,
can I
guys.
point out the fact, buddy, too, that those liberal networks have reported misinformation for years? I'll give you one story. Russian hoax. The Russian collusion hoax of President Trump, CNN, MSNBC, the big three, ABC, NBC, they're all guilty of reporting misinformation since 2016. They're not off the air. And can I point out too, buddy, it wasn't just Direct. It was Verizon and Frontier. 3 cable and satellite carriers in 1 year in a span of 10 months from March to November. 3? Now do you wonder why we got canceled and the other 2 don't? I know.
Yeah,
that's a touchy one, right? I bring the truth, buddy.
And let's face it, as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, we've had legislation introduced by our chairman, Kathy McMorris Rogers, and by the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. This is a heavy lift. This is tough. We got to be very careful that we don't intrude on freedom of speech and the freedom of a business to decide who they're going to do business with and who they're not. However, when you have a letter such as what was reported earlier and what we've all seen from members of Congress who are directly trying to suppress conservative voices because of what they call misinformation, then I think that it rises to the level of where we've got to use the tool in our tool chest and we've got to get involved.
Well, I appreciate that. What will we see going forward? I love that we've got James Comer on the head of oversight. There's a lot of great America First and MAGA folks now that got appointed to that committee. So what can we expect to see? And I'm not talking about for us here, although, yeah, I'm worried about the 140, 150 employees and the amazing Herring family who has built this network from scratch in 2013 up to what it is and what it was last year until they came after us. I'm worried about the employees here too, because let me tell you what, they work hard every day. And we need somebody sticking up for us. So I'm hoping that this oversight committee takes this seriously and actually begins hearings, not just on the fact that Twitter and big tech's been censoring people like the president and other people, but that they took down an entire network off 3 carriers in less than a year, buddy.
And we've made it clear in the Republican majority in the House that oversight and government accountability, holding the government accountable, is going to be one of the 4 pillars of which we govern in this Republican majority. And we're going to do that. Oversight is a great tool, and we're going to use that tool. And we're going to make sure, look, what's at stake here? Freedom of speech is at stake here.
And freedom of press. That one's also in there. Like I said, I've enjoyed both for the last 30 years, and I use them both every day, 5 days a week, to pay the bills and put food on the table for my family. So I love nothing more than freedom of press and freedom of speech. And I hope that Buddy Carter and this new oversight committee will do what they've promised, move forward, investigate what the hell happened to One American News, along with all the other conservative outlets out there that have been censored on social media and on carriers, because it is happening, it did happen, it's not a conspiracy theory, and there needs to be consequences for it. Representing Georgia's first, Congressman Buddy Carter, welcome back anytime. Thank you, sir, for being a voice.
Thank you.
Yep, you take care.